If this film had been called something else with different character names and marketed as loosely inspired by Wuthering Heights, then it would have been fine. It's visually striking, the performances are strong, it has moments that work, but this is not Wuthering Heights. So let's talk about it. Let's start by talking about our main characters, Cathy and Heathcliff. I've always found that this book is fairly polarizing. There are those who absolutely adore this novel, such as myself. It's one of my all-time favorites. And then there are those who read it and just don't understand why people love it so much. And I think in large part it's because these two characters are so highly unlikable. And I just wish that we had a film version of this book that had the courage to make the characters as unlikable as they are in the novel. Now, in the book, Cathy and Heathcliff's relationship, it's kind of their only redeeming quality, the love and devotion that they have for one another. It's what makes them human because they are pretty cruel to most everyone else in this entire story. Now, the fact that they can't be together, that their love, their passion is repressed, and that repression channels itself into their abusive behaviors, that is kind of the central tension of the novel, at least certainly the first half of the novel, and that's completely absent in the film. The question of race is erased altogether, and it's critical to why Cathy chooses Edgar as a respectable partner over Heathcliff, and also critical to why Heathcliff is so mistreated and therefore develops such strong resentment. He doesn't belong. He'll never belong. And this is in part why he and Catherine form such a strong bond, because in many ways, she doesn't belong either. She doesn't even belong in heaven. She says that heaven is not for her. If I were in heaven, Nelly, I should be extremely miserable. Because you are not fit to go there, I answered. All sinners would be miserable in heaven. But it is not for that. I dreamt once that I was there. I tell you, I won't hearken to your dreams, Miss Catherine. I'll go to bed, I interrupted again. She laughed and held me down, for I made a motion to leave my chair. This is nothing, cried she. I was only going to say that heaven did not seem to be my home, and I broke my heart with weeping to come back to earth, and the angels were so angry they flung me out into the middle of the heath on the top of Wuthering Heights, where I woke sobbing for joy. That will do to explain my secret as well as the other. I've no more business to marry Edgar Linton than I have to be in heaven, and if the wicked man in there had not brought Heathcliff so low, I shouldn't have thought of it. It would degrade me to marry Heathcliff now, so he shall never know how I love him. And that, not because he's handsome, Nelly, but because he's more myself than I am. Whatever our souls are made of, his and mine are the same. And Linton's is as different as the moonbeam from lightning, or frost from fire. The conventional conception of heaven, it's not her heaven. She doesn't want it. She will haunt the moors forever and be happier for it. Being able to make readers feel any degree of sympathy for these characters despite their cruelty and selfishness is, to me, part of the brilliance of Bronte's writing and Bronte's storytelling. But the film chooses a Romeo and Juliet framing in which they're star-crossed lovers foiled by circumstances, rather than two people who only work together because they really don't belong with absolutely anybody else and are incapable of true kindness to anybody else. This is why Emerald Fennell's version of these characters feels like it came out of another story. They're not my Cathy and Heathcliff. Now let's talk themes, because the central themes here are pretty much gone. As I discussed earlier, the theme of racial identity and discrimination is completely eliminated from the story. Heathcliff is one of the only non-white main characters in the English literary canon, and yet almost every attempt to adapt this novel has made Heathcliff white. It's 2026 at this point. I don't understand why we can't have a Heathcliff that looks like Heathcliff is supposed to look, especially given that how he looks is so important to the plot and to his character development. When Heathcliff is first introduced, the description says that he is a dark-skinned gypsy. It cannot be any more clear right from the get-go, and there are multiple points throughout the story where this is emphasized again. When Catherine's father brings Heathcliff home to Wuthering Heights for the first time as a child and introduces him to the family, he says this, "But you must e'en take it as a gift of God, though it's as dark almost as if it came from the devil. So again, dark, and then we have the word it constantly used to describe him instead of, like an actual human pronoun. In the very next paragraph, he's referred to as a gypsy brat. Later in the novel, he's described as having a, quote, dark face and hair. And then even later, Catherine's daughter sees him for the first time, and she assumes that he's an Arabian merchant. Is it too much to ask that we explore the racial dynamics that Brontë so clearly points to throughout her novel? There's also no cycle of generational trauma shown in the film. It completely cuts out the next generation and therefore basically the entire second half of the book. This serves once again to make Heathcliff less abusive because a lot of the abuse comes up during that section of the story, but it also serves to erase the kind of happy ending. You usually think of this as such a dark novel throughout, but by the end, this next generation is able to finally break that cycle of abuse. So we don't see that happen in the film either. We don't explore the classism nearly as much either. The character of Nelly is their lifelong servant, even though she's about their age and was kind of a playmate when they were little. And the character of Nelly is very different in the book versus the film. In the book, Nelly narrates the entire events of the story as someone who's been privy to all of these private moments between the family members. It's been much discussed in analysis of Wuthering Heights that Nelly could be an unreliable narrator because she is filtering everything through her own perspective, and she could be downplaying some of her involvement in some of the unfolding events as well. However, it's also clear that there are no easy answers when managing life with these people, and that Nelly is constantly being put in a place of having to decide between equally morally gray choices. In the film, that nuance is gone. Nelly becomes the villain, making Cathy kind of a tragic hero. In fact, at the end, on her deathbed, she says to Nelly, "I won't tell," and giving her grace for something that she did that doesn't actually occur in the book. So some plot elements are completely changed to make Nelly more clearly duplicitous. Now, if a film adaptation wanted to explore Nelly as an unreliable narrator, I think that would be really cool, but it could be done in such a way where we see Nelly narrating the story to Lockwood, but then simultaneously see in the visuals via the other characters what was actually happening. And again, those differences should be subtle and nuanced, not showing Nelly to be just completely fabricating a lot of things. Other than the characterization and the thematic focus, the film also largely departs from the book in terms of tone. The film has moments of humor, whereas there is absolutely nothing that's funny about the book. There's a lot that feels like it's inserted for shock value in the film. There's certainly shocking moments in the book, but they mostly revolve around Cathy and Heathcliff's cruelty. And since the film wants us to like them despite their flaws, it replaces those moments of shock with moments that are exclusively meant to disturb or titillate, since they no longer serve the themes or the character psychologies. So the film feels like it's exploring sexual fantasies rather than trying to psychologically dissect these characters. In fact, when I was watching this in the cinema, there was a row of people behind me who were giggling at a particular scene. It's when Heathcliff returns and he's now a wealthy man. He's having dinner with the Lintons, and it's very clear to anyone in the audience watching the film that in that moment, Isabella is lusting after Heathcliff. And so there was laughter behind me, and one of the ladies was like, "Same girl, same." So this is clearly evoking the kind of reaction that you would expect from a provocative romance rather than from a dark gothic masterpiece. Tonally, I would say that the film felt kind of like a Pinterest board of inspo, things that the director wanted to explore via the vague aesthetic lens of Wuthering Heights. Okay, we're going to end with some things that I liked about this film. I did like the highly stylized visuals, even if it wasn't period appropriate. That usually doesn't bother me. I know there was a lot of talk about that when some of the stills were coming out, but it doesn't bother me as long as the essence of the book is represented. So I didn't mind the costuming and all of that. I thought it was really interesting to look at. I think it also had beautiful cinematography. I enjoyed the music in the film as well. And Obviously, like the actors' performances were great. These were great actors who were cast in the film. Margot Robbie is wonderful. Jacob Elordi is wonderful. I think they were miscast. Jacob Elordi because of the racial element in part, but also both of them were too old for those roles. I definitely want to see many more films that show love stories between people who are not, 21. But Wuthering Heights was not the story to do that with. The actress who plays Nelly, I don't know her name. I'll go ahead and put it down here somewhere. She was also like a standout in the performance for me. Isabella's actress, also will put her name down here. She stood out to me as well. And then also the two children who played like baby Cathy and Heathcliff, those two were great actors. And I think they really did bring across what Cathy and Heathcliff were like at that age. So I enjoyed the performances. And lastly, one thing I feel like the film really got right was the sense of setting in terms of the actual moors. I don't know where this was filmed. I don't know if it was filmed in the actual area where the Brontes lived, but it did look the way that you picture it from the novel. So I thought that that was accurately represented, and just the weather overall, the tempestuousness, the rain, all of that was very atmospheric in the way that it is in the novel. So I didn't mind the aesthetic vision and an attempt to explore desire and jealousy or possessiveness through the lens of this otherwise standard tragic love story. In the end, I didn't actually hate it. It just wasn't Wuthering Heights.